Family, glad to be back with you. Let me stop my music. Oh shoot, let me cut this down. I know the sound is working, so that's fantastic. Glad to be back with you for another Thursday night book club. Hope you've been having a fantastic week. Happy pre-Friday. I know I'm feeling pretty good. Um, I had something interesting. So on Tuesday we do a lot of more conversations about healing and spirituality and going deeper into yourself and connection between you and the universe and all types of stuff. But one of the main things that we talk about is trying to make sure that we are aware of the signs and the symbols that the universe sends us to let us know we're on the right path. So if you don't know, you will know now. I do energy readings on Tuesday nights. We have energy readings sometimes too. But I do energy readings. I do those virtually where I use a pendulum and we just go through every chakra energy point and we talk about the energy that is connected to you or the energy that you are dealing with within you, right? We try to put words to it. And then I also do that in person and then I do Reiki sessions and dab a little bit in the plant medicine and stuff like that while we do Reiki sessions. Like we use Hape and cacao and stuff like that to help tear down some of our physical barriers, some of the barriers that we put up that don't allow us to have that vulnerable and authentic conversations that we need to have. But anyway, so normally when I do those things, I haven't really even charged anybody, right? Because I've been under the impression, people need certain things, and I don't want someone to need what I have to offer and cost get in the way of that. I don't want anybody to be like, nah, I need the services, but I can't afford it. So I generally don't charge, but I do say, I started off with I ain't gonna charge you, but refer somebody to me that I can charge. And referrals are interesting because people get very protective of the space that I provide for them. Safe space with vulnerability and a safe space for them to release and things of that nature. And so they get very protective of that space and they don't always refer. Which is cool. So I moved on from the referral and I started doing Hey Liberty. Yeah, I'm telling a story. So I moved on from the referrals to just whatever the spirit is so moved to give you. You know what I mean? So I allow people to pay whatever they want to at this point, right? And that goes how it goes, as anticipated. But last night I did a energy reading, right? And I've been doing it for a while. It ain't making a lot of money. I invest way more into this than I get returned financially. Let me make that clear because I get a lot in return, which is why I don't mind investing into the soul family, what we're trying to build here. But I did an energy reading last night, and I really had no intention on charging them. But they asked for, some of my information, send me some money, and I wasn't gonna send it. But try to be respectful of their wishes, and I don't want to block anybody else's blessings because they try to bless me. And they sent me a good amount of money for my services, right? And I really appreciate it. It was funny because in that reading, we wound up having a conversation about ego. And I was trying to explain how ego is two main things that came out of that peace is not the absence of conflict. You know what I mean? And ego is that space between where your physical and your spiritual are in conflict, right? So when they sent it, when I got it, I was like, my physical was like, yo, this too much. But my spirit was like, oh man, you really value my services. So, I'm saying all this long story to tell you. I took it as a sign that I'm doing the right thing. You know what I mean? People value my services. They sent me, I ain't gonna say because I don't want to put all my business in the street, but they sent a good amount of money. And it made me physically uncomfortable. So my ego was like, nah, but my spirit was like, pay it forward. They got blessings coming for supporting that. And it's ironic because it's a person that's kind of quietly supportive. They don't really be on the shows or anything like that. But if I post a need or something like that, they always find a way to support the need. So I appreciate that. Long story. But all that just to say, Pay attention to the signs the universe is giving you as you along your path, and don't allow ego to block your blessings and other people's blessings as well too. Learn to receive. Liberty, how was your day? Fishy sticks. Yeah, it's a wild day when I see fish sticks. When I think about this South Park episode when they had Kanye West on it, and they had this joke about fish sticks, and they kept asking, "Do you like fish sticks?" And Kanye was like, "Yeah, I like fish sticks." It's like, "Do you like to push fish sticks in your mouth?" And Kanye was like, "Yes, I like to put fish sticks in my mouth." And then they call him a gay fish. And he get mad because he ain't get the joke. Because they thought he was saying fish sticks. But they weren't saying fish sticks. They were saying fish D's, which is funny. So I'm sorry. Every time I see fish sticks, that's sidetrack. Liberty, how was your day? Oh, word. I was wondering if it was gonna rain. It was looking a little cloudy. I really wanna. I still got my little. I don't know if y'all can see it in the background. Let me see. Oh yeah, you can see it in the back a little bit, but I still got my projector set up, so I definitely plan on spending some time outside. I got me on sidetrack. I'm just telling stories and talking. Anyway, we on our sacral. And the color for your sacral is orange, and I tried to set up the orange lights. That's the color it's supposed to be, but orange and yellow do not translate well with the lighting I have. So I've been working on. I've been planning on working on lighting. Doo-doo-doo. It's your sensuality, your pleasure, your emotions, your creativity, and your relationships. Have that in order. We had a whole conversation about being sacral thinkers and how many people don't think they are. But anyway, now you should have walked in the rain. Well, good. We about to do sacral, and water is the element for sacral. So you know we about to do a rain visualization. And since your rain got messed up, I know we did. No, we did 444 again. We didn't do that Tuesday. Keep the party going. We're gonna do 4-4 again. So finally, we're gonna do our breathing exercise. We're gonna do our bowl. We're gonna do our visualization, but bowl first. shoot. Hey, that was hilarious. Your English is your second language. This is my first. My thumbs be spelling words however it wants to. And I don't even care. That's why I don't let nobody read my notes. Nothing is spelled right. I know a lot of words. You don't got to spell them to know them. So, them two different things. I know a lot of words, but I can't spell nothing. I'll mess up on from and be putting form. So forgive me. Well, since lightning stopped your walk today, we're gonna do our favorite breathing exercise, the 4-4-4. So if you're not familiar with it, it is essentially you breathe in 4-4 count. You hold your breath 4-4 count, and then you breathe out for a 4 count. And all you really got to do is just focus on your breathing and breathing in the energy you want and releasing the energy you want to release. And I'll do the counting for you. So, on my count of 3, 1, 2, 3. Breathe in 4, 2, 3, 4. Hold 4, 2, 3, 4. Release 4, 2, 3, 4. Breathe in 4, 2, 3, 4. Hold 4, 2, 3, 4. Release 4, 2, 3, 4. Last time, family. Breathe in 4, 2, 3, 4. Hold 4, 2, 3, 4. Release 4, 2, 3, 4. All right, so Tuesday I told this whole story about a movie I watched called Love and Monsters. But essentially, the main character had been living underground for 7 years, and he decided to come above ground to go find his high school girlfriend. And as he's on his journey and his voyage, he gets to a space where it rains. And he stood in the rain and just enjoyed the rain because it was something he hadn't seen in 7 years. And rain and water has very good cleansing property. It can reshape and shape. It can destroy and create. It can wash you anew. By your tears is your soul cleansed. So I want you to imagine yourself standing in a space, whether it be the middle of the street, whether it be your porch, your backyard, whether it be a field full of daisies. I want you to take some time and imagine yourself just standing in this field, just breathing in the energy, enjoying the space that you are in, feeling the vibes. And as you are standing there, I want you to see it begin to rain. And you feel that rain upon the top of your head. And as it gets heavier, now to a nice little steady mist. You can feel it dripping on your nose and your ears, and on your lips and your elbows. And you feel this rain. And with every drop, you feel a healing energy, a cleansing energy. You feel stability. You feel love. You feel warmth. You feel clarity. You feel direction. You feel purpose. You feel creative. And I want you to stick your arms out and allow your whole physical to get wet by this cleansing rain, this cleansing water, washing away your worries and replacing it with confidence, washing away your confusion and replacing it with clarity. And I want you to feel it absorb in your soul and make your spirit smile. And as you are enjoying that rain, I want you to repeat after me. I am a creative being. I deserve to enjoy my life. I am emotionally balanced. I welcome sensuality into my life. I am worthy and lovable. I'm a creative being. I deserve to enjoy life. I am emotionally balanced. I welcome sensuality into my life. I am worthy and lovable. All right, family. So, hope you feel like you got some chakra healing. Those some things you can say for yourself. Chakra affirmations. I mean, not chakra, but sacral, excuse me. Sacral affirmations. Eat you some oranges. Wear some orange. Give a hug. Create something. Ignite your pleasure. All right, so we are okay. I know I had you plugged up. Please don't be dead. He was dead. So Lo siento. Yeah, so he in jail. I think his grandma just came to see him, and he didn't want his grandma to see him, so he was feeling a little saddened. He learned. I see in a comment somewhere, and somebody said when they hear somebody say that they like to play chess, they automatically think they've been in jail, and that was funny. Because a lot of people do learn how to play chess in jail. He learned how to play chess in jail, but I did not learn how to play chess in jail. And I know we played all the time in college, so we was far from jail. We played chess, pool, spades, and tunk, and that's about it. Yeah, them pretty much all the card games I play now. I ain't really much of a gambler. Man, what's going on? My Samsung Galaxy Tab. Just really wait for it to load. I'm finding I'm gonna have to make rap songs for y'all and tell some jokes. No, I got no good jokes. I got a story I've been thinking about. It's the it's one of my favorite stories, and it is I think I might have told it on here a long time ago, but it is oh Lord, it's almost there. It was one time it was this bird, and you know how a lot of birds fly south for the winter because they don't really want to deal with snow. There was this one bird that he kind of waited a little too late. And when he started flying south, it was already snowing. So as he was flying, it's snowing, and the snow begins to get a little heavy and weighs his wings down, and he crashed to the ground in the open field. Right. And as he on the ground, it's still snowing, so the snow begins to cover him up. Now, while he's covered with snow, a cow comes by and takes a dump right there where the bird was. And the warmth from the cow manure began to melt the snow, and the bird can feel warm again, and he start chirping and flapping his wings because he think he about to be able to make this flight. And while he chirping, a cat comes by and snatches him up and eats him. Now, the moral to that story is everybody that shit on you ain't your enemy. And everybody that gets you out that shit ain't your friend. Okay, hold on. I know we passed that. Okay, excuse me. Ooh, that was rude. Doo-doo-doo. There were moments in that jail when I felt confinement and heat nearly drove me mad. At those times, I desperately needed to take my thoughts beyond the concrete and steel. When I felt restless tension rising, I'd try anything to calm it. I'd slap backwards with other inmates until I got exhausted, or play chess until my mind shut down. When all else failed, I'd pace the cell block perimeter like a caged lion. Sometimes other inmates fighting the temptation to give in to madness joined me, and we'd pace together round and around and talk for hours about anything that got our minds off the misery. I eventually found a better way to relieve the boredom. I noticed that some inmates broke the monotony by volunteering for certain jobs in the jail. Some mopped the halls, and the others worked in the dispensary or the kitchen. When the inmate librarian was released from jail, I asked for and was given the job. I began distributing the books on the sixth floor as part of my service provided by the Norfolk Public Library. A couple of times a week, I pushed the cart to each cell block, and the inmates chose the books and placed orders for literatures not on the cart. I enjoyed the library work. It gave me a chance to get out into the halls and walk around and stick my face in the screens on the floor windows and inhale fresh air. Beyond the short stories I'd read in high school, I hadn't done much reading. Naturally, while working for the library, I leafed through more books than I normally would have. One day, shortly after starting the job, I picked up a book featuring a black man's picture on the cover. It was titled Native Son, and the author was Richard Wright. I leafed through the first few pages of the front of the book and couldn't put it down. The story was about a confused, angry young black man named Bigger Thomas, whose racial fears led him to accidentally suffocate a white woman. In doing so, he delivers himself into the hands of the very people he despises and fears. I identified strongly with Bigger and the book's narrative. He was 20, the same age as me. He felt the things I felt, and like me, he wound up in prison. The book's portrait of Bigger captured all those conflicting feelings: restless, anger, hopelessness, a tough facade among blacks, and deep-seated fear of the whites that I sensed in myself was unable to express. Often during my teenage years, I felt like Bigger, headed down the road towards the destruction I couldn't ward off, beaten by forces so large and amorphous that I had no idea how to fight back. I was surprised that somebody had written a book that so closely reflected my experiences and feelings. I read that book every day and continued reading by the dim light of the hall lamps at night while everyone slept. On that early morning when I finished reading Native Son, which ends with Bigger waiting to go to the electric chair, I broke down and sobbed like a baby. There's this one passage that so closely describes how I felt that it stunned me. It's a passage where a lawyer's talking to Bigger, who has given up hope and is waiting to die. You're trying to believe in yourself, and every time you try to find a way to live, your own mind stands in your way. You know why that is? It's because others have said you were bad and they made you live in bad conditions. When a man hears that over and over and looks about him and sees that life is bad, he begins to doubt in his own mind. His feelings drag him forward, and his mind, full of what others say about him, tells him to go back. The job in getting people to fight and have faith is in making them believe in what life has made them feel. Make them feel that their feelings are as good as others. After reading that, I sat up in my bunk, buried my face in my hands, and wept uncontrollably. I cried so much that I felt relieved. It was like I had been carrying those feelings and holding in my pain for years, keeping keeping it pushed to the back of my mind somewhere. I was unaccustomed to dealing with such deep feelings. Occasionally I'd open up the lids, but not a lot. I was messed up inside, empty and afraid, just like Bigger. Native Son confirms for me that my fears weren't imagined and that they were rational reasons why I'd been hurting inside. I developed through my encounter with Richard Wright's a fascination with the power of words. It blew my mind to think that somebody could take words that describe exactly how I felt and put them together in a story like that. Most of the books I've been given in school were about white folks' experiences and feelings. I spent all that time learning about damn white folks, like my reality didn't exist and wasn't valid to the rest of the world. In school, the only time we really focused on the lives of black people was during Black History Week, which they set aside for us to learn the same old tired stories about Booker T. Washington and a few other noteworthy dead black folks I couldn't relate to. But in Native Son, I found a book about a plain, everyday brother like myself. That turned me on in a big way and inspired me to look for more books like that. Before long, I was reading every chance I got, trying to more fully understand why life and the lives of my friends had been so contained and predictable, and why prison literally had become a rite of passage for many of us. I found books that took me places I'd never dreamed I could travel and exposed me to a range of realities that seems as vast as the universe itself. Once, after reading a book of poems by Gwendolyn Brooks, I wrote to her, not really expecting to receive a reply. She wrote me back and sent me an inspirational paperback of hers titled Aloneness. I was thrilled that a well known black writer like her had taken the time to respond to me. I was most attracted to black classics such as Malcolm X's autobiography. Malcolm's tale helped me understand the devastating effects of self hatred and introduced me to a universal principle that if you can change your self perception, you can change your behavior. I concluded that if Malcolm X, who had also gone to prison, could pull his life out of the toilet, maybe I could too. Up to that point, I'd often wanted to think of myself as a bad N word, and as a result, I tried to act like one. After reading about Malcolm X, I worked to get rid of that notion and replace it with a positive image of what I wanted to become. I walked around silently, repeating to myself, "You are an intelligent, thinking human being." Affirmations. That shit has worked. It works. You are an intelligent, thinking human being, hoping that it would sink in and help me begin to change the way I viewed myself. Malcolm X made his conversion through Islam. I seen Muslims selling newspapers and bean pies on the street, but I didn't know anything about their religion. I was drawn to Christianity, mostly because it was familiar. I hadn't spent much time in church. It seemed that all they did in churches I'd been to was learn how to justify suffering at the hands of white folks. But now there were Christian ministers active in the jail, and I became interested. They came around about once a week and talked to inmates through the bars, praying with them and reading scripture. I started talking with them about God and about life in general. It wasn't hard to accept the possibility that there was a higher force watching over me. When I look back at my life, I concluded that there had been far too many close calls, times when I could have offed somebody or gotten killed myself, for me to believe that I had survived solely on luck. I wondered, why didn't that bullet strike Plaz in the heart when I shot him? Why didn't I pull the trigger on that McDonald's manager when he tried to get away? And why wasn't I in the corner that night stick partners were shot? Unable to come up with rational answers to those questions, I reasoned that God must be pulling for me. My interest in spiritual things also came from a need to reach out to my most powerless point and tap into a higher power, something beyond me, and at the same time within me. I longed for a sense of wholeness that I never knew, but since I was entitled to. It is your birthright. I set out to learn more about my spiritual self. I began exploring the Bible with other inmates who held Bible studies some nights in the cell block. At some point, I also got a library copy of the book As a Man Thinketh that Reverend Ellis had given me in college. I immediately understood what he had been trying to get across to me, that thinking should be an active process. When cultivated, can change a person's behavior, circumstances, and ultimately his fate. When I first started reading, studying, and reflecting on the information I got from books, I had no idea where it all might lead. Really, it didn't matter. I was hungry for change and so excited by the sense of awakening I glimpsed on the horizon that only thing that mattered was that I had made a start. I often recite the scriptures that Reverend Ellis had given me to read before I was sentenced. Everything works together for the good of those that love God and for those who are called according to his purpose. If that's true, I thought, maybe I can get something positive out of this prison time. It sure didn't seem like it, but it made me feel better just thinking that it might be possible. Chapter 19, Homecoming. Oh, yeah, man, we got a lot of this book left. Although I had resisted the idea of marriage when I was on the street, near the end of my 6 month stint in the Norfolk jail, I was eager to take the vows with Liz. I came up with a lot of reasons to justify wanting to do it. But the bottom line was, on some level, I wanted to make sure she'd stay around to help me do my time. Prisoners often cling to anybody they can think of to help them ease the pain of doing time. It gives them a greater sense of security, knowing that somebody has vowed to suffer through that hell with them. I saw dudes in prison claim to fall madly in love with old women friends they didn't look twice at on the streets. A woman could be cross-eyed, knock-kneed, pigeon-toed, have the IQ of a brick, but to a dude who's been locked up a long time, she's a thing of beauty and a treasure sure enough. When I raised the idea of marriage to Liz in a letter, she eagerly agreed. She wanted to get married before then. We gotten as far as the parking lot leading to the justice office of the peace once, but then I made up some lame excuse to go back out, leaving her in tears. Liz and I got our blood test and were moving forward with the planned jailhouse wedding ceremony when something unexpected happened. One fall morning in October, a week before the wedding, a guard came to the cell block entrance and shouted, "McCall, pack your bags." It was a day to be shipped off to prison. I forgot all about marriage after that. I was handcuffed and shackled to several others inmates and taken to a waiting van that had thick mesh wire covering the rear window and contained two wooden benches on either side of the rear loading area where we sat. We rode through the Norfolk Tunnel and into Portsmouth, then headed on the Interstate 264. Midway along the highway, I caught a glimpse of Cavalier Manor near Victory Boulevard. It felt creepy riding past my old stomping ground. It was a painful reminder that my life was now controlled totally by other people. As we rode along, Cavalier Manor faded from view. It dawned on me all over again that it would be years before I passed this way or saw that area again. After 2 hours, the familiar city streets gave way to rural roads. I saw farmland, herds of livestock, and stately houses sitting on rolling hills. It looked like the kind of place where all the people hang big American flags on their front porches. We got to Southampton Correctional Center, 80 or so miles from Portsmouth, and were taken to a reception and diagnostic center, a basement facility called the receiving unit, a large dormitory lined with about 50 bunk beds on each side of a room. It looked like a bomb shelter inside. The receiving unit was a way station for the prison system. Over the course of a month, inmates who came through there were given a battery of psychological tests and physical exams and were classified before being shipped to various prisons throughout Virginia. They were also assigned prison numbers while there. My number was 106383. That number became more important to me than my name. It was used to identify my mail. Guards addressed me by it when calling me to the visiting room. It was stenciled onto my clothes and stamped into my brain. It became so much part of my identity that years later, when I got out of prison, I used it as part of my secret computer code at work and have used variations of it for combination locks and bank card codes. Unlike prisoners in the general population at Southampton, who went in and out of their buildings every day, receiving unit inmates remained indoors round the clock, except at meal times. Every day we marched single file down the long sidewalks to the cafeteria to eat. Like clockwork, the established Southampton inmates lined up along the sidewalks at our evening meal time to study us newcomers as we walked past. Some wolves whistled and taunted guys who looked sweet or scared to them. Yo, hey baby, what's your name? You need some candy or some cigarettes? You need somebody to take care of you? Others looked for friends or relatives they heard that were coming through the receiving unit. Several times I spotted homeboys. We acknowledged each other with waves and nods, but weren't allowed to stop and talk. Every other day or so, a handful of guys were shipped out of the receiving unit to other institutions or sent upstairs into the general population at Southampton. Administrators wouldn't tell us in advance where we were shipped to serve our time. I wanted to stay at Southampton, where there were lots of homeboys from Portsmouth and Cavalier Manor. Eventually, I got my wish. One morning, my number was called and I was sent upstairs, along with several other inmates. On the day I arrived on the yard, a group of homeboys, Joe Ham, Bonaparte, Feetball, Marvin, Joe Burns, Pearly Blue, Tony Rome, and Chili Bear, we were standing around waiting, eager to hear the latest word from the streets. Some of those guys had been locked up for years and had no idea how much the block had changed since they left. Some wanted updates on Scooby D and other well-known hoods ruling the streets. Others asked about girls they dated and wanted to date. Yo, man, whatever happened to that big leg girl who lived in Freedom Court? She got knocked up and had a baby. What's that girl named Ramona doing these days? She doing the same old, same old. I hadn't seen much of her before I left the streets. We talked for hours and caught up on each other's lives. They'd offer to help me adjust in any way they could. Choice food stolen from the kitchen, specially pressed clothes from the laundry. Anything you need, homeboy, just let me know. I went to my cell that evening riding a cloud. The comfort of familiar faces briefly made me forget that the circumstances that had brought us together. For a minute, there it felt like homecoming in Cavalier Manor. Except for the ever present iron bars and tall barbed wire fence surrounding the place, Southampton vaguely resembled a college campus. It had five dormitory buildings, a large cafeteria, an administration building, a canteen, and a chapel, all of which ringed a huge courtyard. My new living quarters were located in a long building painted an ugly lime green inside and lined from front to back with jail cells on two tiers. I was placed in the second tier cell about the size of your standard bathroom. It contained a steel bunk with paper thin mattress, a small knobless sink, and a metal storage cabinet, and a seatless commode placed near the cell door in full view of everybody who walked past. The cell was cramped, but it was mine. After living in a dormitory for half a year, it felt like I was at the fucking Waldorf. I cherished my shell for what little privacy it afforded. I could retreat there late evenings after chow and chill all alone for the rest of the night. I noticed that some cats took almost an excessive pride in their cell homes. They carefully decorated them with matching bathroom towels that they hung over the sink, used to adorn storage cabinets, and draped over cell windows as makeshift curtains. Some inmates got really grand and bought thick, expensive cow, expensive towels in coordinated rich colors to make their cells look prison plush. You couldn't tell them that their cribs weren't laid out. They acted like they live in posh high-rise condos instead of stinking jail cells. Watching them made me realize right away how you can lose perspective after being locked up a long time. Inmates lived in two types of buildings. There were three C buildings, which had cells, and two R buildings, which had rooms. Southampton's administrators had instituted a behavior modification system where they moved inmates gradually from C1 to more comfortable buildings and granted more privileges as inmates went through for stretches of times without getting in trouble. Inmates in C1, where I started, were locked in their cells evenings and allowed out only to shower. Those who kept a clean record for, say, 4 months were promoted to the C2 building, where they were allowed to play cards, mingle, and watch TV. Most inmates worked to get to the top of the two R buildings. They got their own room with a key and were granted more freedom to come and go as they pleased. Advancing from a C to an R was roughly the equivalent of moving from public housing to the sprawling suburbs. C1 was the wildest building at Southampton. More than half the guys there were old timers who didn't give a shit about moving up. Some of those cats had so much time to serve that they had no hope of getting out and no incentive to follow the rules. They couldn't care less if they got into a fight or made a short time or missed parole. They, the hard nosed among them, walked around posturing like they were the baddest in the world, wearing vicious scowls and repeating Southampton's macho credo: "If you ain't no killer, don't f with me." That bunch didn't worry me. I knew many of them were fronting, playing crazy N words roles to keep the pressure off them. What concerned me most were the cats who were truly insane, like the one inmate who walked around eyes bulging, staring at the sky, and that many others who had that long gone, far away look. I wondered if one of them, in a fit of blind hysteria, might shank somebody out the blue. I didn't want to be standing near one of the crazies when he went off. In those first few months in C1, I spent a lot of time taking the pulse of prison life, learning to identify the wolves, the hustlers, the thumpers, the loudmouth bucks, the thieves, and the few progressive inmates in my building. From my second floor perch, I saw all kinds of transaction amongst the guys, handing off contraband and paying off debts with cigarettes and cookies as they passed each other on the first floor. By watching others' mistakes, I also learned some of the do's and don'ts of prison life. Like, don't be seen getting too chummy with administrators. It makes the hustlers paranoid. And don't wear slingshots. That's the prison name for men's briefs. It never occurred to me that there was anything wrong with them until I saw a white inmate, a newcomer like me, walk past my cell on his way to the showers wearing Fruit of the Looms. When everybody started whistling and making cat calls at him, I got the message. Men's brief are tight fitting, and anything tight fitting is an invitation to trouble. I also learned that some prison guards preyed on inmates as much as prisoners preyed on each other. One night after the lights turned out, I was reading by the light of the hall lamps. A white prison guard walked by quietly to the nearby cell of a known black homosexual, glanced around nervously, then unlocked the door and let the inmate out. He escorted the inmate to the back of the building toward the solitary confinement cell. They remained there a good half an hour before the guard returned the inmate to his cell. It didn't take rocket science to figure out what they had done. I spent most of my time reading, writing letters, and memorizing new words. After struggling through Das Kapital by Karl Marx, I realized that my limited vocabulary made me miss the full meaning of much of that read. I decided that whenever I came across an unfamiliar word, I stopped reading, look it up in the dictionary, memorize it, and use it in a sentence before I resumed reading. I then recorded the new words in a loose leaf notebook and practiced using them in conversations. It took me months sometimes to get through a single book, but my speed and comprehension got better over time. At some point in my reading, I ran across Rudyard Kipling's poem If, which was so inspiring to me that I memorized it and recited it as my mantra every day. It's ironic that I got so deep into something written by a person who's widely considered a racist, but the poem had no racist racial overtone. In fact, it had universal appeal. That poem challenged me to re examine my self imposed limitations and encouraged me to fight nagging fears that I had ruined my life beyond repair. I recited to myself sometimes after visits from Liz and my son Monroe, who was then 2 years old. I recited it when I felt discouraged or blue. Later, when I got out of prison and went through other hard times working with white folks and trying to find my way, I recited it to help keep perspective. One of my favorite sections of that poem said, "If you can dream and not make your dreams your master, if you can think and not make your thoughts your aim, if you can meet with triumph and disaster and treat those two imposters just the same." I was sitting outside on one of the building stoops, staring across the prison yard one day when two of my homies, Joe Ham and Pearly Blue, came in view about 50 yards away. They bopped down the sidewalk towards the chapel and approached two white inmates standing there. They talked a moment, then Joe Ham hauled off and sucker punched one of the whites in the face. Pearly Blue tackled the guy's partner and the four of them got into it. Reflexively, I got up and started to run over and jump in. Then I stopped and reconsidered. In that instant, a bunch of guards ran over and broke up the rumble. They slapped handcuffs on all four inmates and led them away to solitary confinement. The word on the yard is that the fight stemmed from a gang-related beef over a sale of mash, homemade whiskey that some inmates sold. Joe Ham and Pearly Blue were tried by a prison panel, and then each was placed in a dark isolation cell where inmates were punished for breaking the rules. Had I gone over to help them, I would have gotten locked up too and hurt my chances of making first parole. The incident brought home the fact that there was a lot going on in Southampton that I needed to avoid and made me realize that I needed to figure out where I fit in. Gang rivalries ran deep, and my homies from Cavalier Manor were in the thick of it. They led one of the two largest gangs in Southampton, known as the Tidewater Gangs. It was made up of inmates of Portsmouth, Norfolk, Newport News, and Virginia Beach. Its main rival was the Richmond Gang, made up of inmates from Richmond, Virginia's largest city. The Richmond Gang members could recognize by their dark Ray Charles-like sunshades and the black silk stocking caps on their head. The Tidewater and Richmond gangs each had its own football and basketball team, a sizable interest in the mass market at Southampton, and a firm handle on drugs, street liquor, and other contraband smuggled into the place. They often competed for control of gay men who they called boys, who come to Southampton. There were other weaker gangs made up of black inmates from smaller locales and gangs of whites who banded together for protection. There were no more white. There were more whites at Southampton than in Norfolk jail, but still they were the minority. Inmates with no gang ties and those from other states had to fend for themselves. Those who couldn't hold their own, standing by themselves, got eaten alive, turned into somebody's boy, ripped off, or taken advantage of in another way. The gang scene posed a dilemma for me. Hanging with my homeboys offered guaranteed backup, which practically every inmate needs to live in peace, but it also made it harder for me to break away from the past. Once it became clear what some of my homeboys went into, I spent less time with them and joined a group of guys who had formed a Christian fellowship. In weekly meetings held in the basement of one building, we read scripture, sang, and talked about God. Some of my homies thought I was faking a religious conversation to try to make parole the first time up, but the spiritual change was very real to me. From the first time in my life, I consciously was involved in an ongoing search to understand the meaning of my existence, and the searching itself gave me a sense of purpose that I'd never known. It didn't take long for my homies to notice that I had distanced myself from them. One day, Pearly Blue came to me and said, "Yo, man, why you ain't hanging with the fellas?" I told him, "Hey, man, you know I'm trying to move in a different direction. I can't hang out and do that too. That would make me a hypocrite. Nobody don't have a problem with it, do they? Nah, man, we just know that you hang with them Christian dudes and always reading books and shit. That's no problem with us, but other guys in the yard might thinking maybe you turned to God because you can't handle the time. They think you weak when you get in that Christian bag. You know this ain't exactly the best place to be turning no other cheek." Facts. I saw clearly what Pearly Blue was getting at. He was trying to tell me that I couldn't afford to have my head tucked so high in the clouds that I couldn't watch my back. The environment was full of wolves looking for weakness to exploit, especially newcomers. Safety was one concern, but for me, the real issue was allegiance, which I'd always felt strongly about. I was torn between old alliances and new commitment to change. At times, especially on warm, sunny days when all the gangs hung together on the prison yard, it felt awkward not being a part of the hometown crowd. Torn between impulses to hang with my homies and break those ties. I played it by ear, hanging with them sometimes and studying Christian fellowship most of the time. I wrestled with major questions. What if a rumble broke out involving my hometown gang? Would I help my homies or stand on the sidelines like I done with Pearly Blue and Joe Hampton? If I wasn't committed to them, could I expect their help? If I got in beef with a member of another gang, I didn't know how to respond to those certain situations, and it bothered me sometimes. The prison was actually a large farm. Inmates produced all kinds of vegetables and raised livestock, which was used to feed the prisoners at Southampton and other institutions statewide. Excuse me. Inmates were paid 35 cents daily for their work. I often thought that if I ever got out of prison, I would jump at the chance to work for minimum wage. Most of my homies had enough seniority to get plum jobs in the laundry, the kitchen, and the dental lab. As a new inmate, I was signed to the gun gang. Each morning, we were taken by a truck to pick peas and other vegetables. Okay, cool. And other vegetables in the vast farm fields. Down on all fours in rows of vegetables, plucking up food and sweat and sweltering heat. I couldn't help wondering what it must have been like for my ancestors to toil like this with no hope of being freed. Always nearby was a symbolic old massa, a white shotgun toting prison guard. The entire compound seemed like one big plantation. The warden and his assistants were white, as were most of the top administrators. Some things let me know that a number of whites who had worked at Southampton had that southern slave holding mindset. I saw it in the way that they treated some inmates, especially one dude who had worked with me on the gun game. We called him Heavy. He was tall, fat, and jovial. That cat loved to laugh. He was uneducated, and the white supervisors made fun of him to his face and behind his back. One day, my supervisor called over one of his white friends and said, "Watch this." Then he called Heavy over and said, "Tell us about niggas and flies, Heavy." Heavy smiled broadly and recited, niggas and flies I do despise. The more I see, the more I like flies. Then my supervisor and the other white man looked at each other in the way white people communicate with each other with their eyes when blacks are around, and slapped their thighs and laughed like there was some deeper private joke between them. Although he was a likable guy, I hated Heavy for being that stupid. I pulled him to the side a few times and said, "Man, don't you know they making fun of you?" He answered, "Man, I ain't worried about them crackers. I just let them think they laughing with them. I'm smarter than them. So what are you getting out of it if you outsmarting them?" Heavy got serious. "I'm getting the pleasure of laughing at them. Sometimes I want to take my shovel and bust him and our supervisor in the head." I suppose Gun Gang had its meaningful purpose beyond providing us with food, but if there was some deeper value, it was lost on me. To me, it was the kind of demeaning, backbreaking labor that my stepfather tried to prepare me for, the very kind I resisted most of my life. It threw me into a serious funk. One day, the farm work got to me so much I rebelled outright. I was in a bad mood, feeling sorry for myself and wondering how much more I could take when my supervisors barked at several inmates and me. "Load those feed bags on the truck." I bent down and tested the weight of the bags, then protested. "These 100-pound bags, can't we double up and throw them in the truck?" When he ordered me again to do as he said, I exploded. "I ain't doing the slavery over. I'm sick of this shit." Inmates stopped working and stared. The gun guard stiffened, and the supervisor moved closer and squinted his blue eyes threateningly at me. "I'm only going to ask you one more time." I glared back and stood my ground. "I ain't doing it." The supervisor wrote up a complaint and sent me back to the hill, where I was thrown in the lockup. When I thought about what I'd done, I realized that my anger, I'd forgotten to apply the Mo Battles principle of consequences. In that one act, I had lost freedom I had, spoiling my prison record, and hurting my chances of making first parole. I got depressed. Then resignation set in. The same resignation that had taken over when I was arrested. It says, "Now you've done it. You've gone too far. You failed to consider consequences. Now it's time to pay." Within a few days, I was taken before a prison panel. I fully expected to be found guilty and placed in isolation, but I got lucky. The supervisor had charged that I refused to work. The panel pointed out that I hadn't refused to work. I simply refused to lift those heavy bags alone. Because of the inaccurate wording in my supervisor's complaint, the panel dropped the charges. I took that ordeal as a sign from God and a warning that I need to work on my attitude. It made me think of a message I read in a book by Gwendolyn Brooks. When the hand of the lemon, make lemonade. I decided to try. After returning to the gun gang, I started working harder, doing more than my share, and also doing things without having to be told. Nothing, not even shoveling shit from a cow and pig's pen, bothered me. I eagerly cleaved the pens and tossed 100-pound feed bags and was the first to jump off the truck when we rode into the fields to herd cattle, repair broken fences, and feed other livestock. After a while, I discovered that farm work wasn't too bad after you got used to it. I realized that it's your attitude about the work you do that can determine how unpleasant or pleasant it is. For the first time, I understood what my father's stepfather meant when he said there was dignity in all work. A few times when my stepfather and my mother came to visit me at Southampton, I wanted to tell them what I realized. The words formed in my mind, and it seemed they got as far as my throat, but they wouldn't come out. So I held it all in and hoped that he'd know someday. Doo-doo-doo. Okay, yeah, we'll finish the chapter. Give me a second. Doo-doo-doo. Not long after the hearing, I was assigned to one of the most prestigious white collar inmate jobs at Southampton, working in the prison library. I thought I died and gone to heaven. Getting that job meant I had access to all the newspaper, periodicals, and books in the library. It meant that I didn't have to work under slave conditions in the rain and cold with an armed white man standing over me. It meant I could finally go to work and return in clean clothes. The library was a two-room building attached to Southampton School where inmates studied to get their GEDs. The larger of the two rooms was an area where inmates came in after work and on weekends. There, they browsed through the books on the shelves and they sat and read newspapers and magazines or chatted quietly among themselves. My job was to keep updated newspapers and periodicals on the racks and shelves, to check the books in and out, and to keep the place clean. I also led a library orientation seminar for new inmates. That helped me work on my spelling skills, my speaking skills. Most days after doing my chores, I browsed through the books and magazines, reading anything that remotely interested me. I loved being in a place where there were so many books. For once in my life, it made me feel that I had total access to the world. I learned also that being able to find information is as valuable a tool as you'll ever pick up. I discovered how to use reference guides to research anything I wanted. I felt a sense of accomplishment whenever I tracked down some esoteric fact, and my getting the new job demonstrated something that hadn't been clear before, that education commands respect wherever you go. Compared to most inmates, I was educated, and that distinction benefited me. It helped me get that plum job. The head librarian was a tall white dude named Mr. McCaffrey, a pipe smoking, easygoing man. He preferred to stay in the back room ordering books and reading rather than hang out front. Two other inmates worked in the library with me. A guy named Hop, a former member of the Black Panther Party, who was doing 10 years for armed robbery. Hop was very intellectual. We played chess and often debated whether Christianity was relevant to the black man's struggle for self-determination in America. Hop said Christianity was the white man's tool, another way to keep N-words nonviolent so white folks can keep cracking them over their head. I argued that Christianity, specifically the black church, had always played a role in the black man's struggle, right on up through the civil rights. My other library co-worker was a strange acting white guy named Lee Hargrave. He was doing a life sentence in connection to the death of several elderly people who had died on a shift at the Richmond hospital where he worked. It was one of the most highly publicized murder cases in the history of the state. When Hargrove first got to Southampton, a short time after I got there, a rumor spread that he'd been assigned to work in the dispensary. Some inmates, I feel low. Some inmates threatened to protest. The prison administrator calmed those fears by assigning him to the library. For good reasons, Hargrave was a paranoid. He knew he was being closely watched by everybody, and inmates and guards alike. Wherever he went on the yard, inmates stared at him and whispered. He responded by withdrawing and completely as possible from prison life. He never ate in the cafeteria with other inmates. He only ate snacks that he bought from the canteen and food that his parents brought him on Saturday visits. He spent most of his time after work in his cell, even when we moved up to other buildings. Hargrove's face was deathly white, and he wore large box shaped glasses. He always had dark rings around his eyes like he had sleep problems. Although he was heavy set, he had a big water head that looked like it belonged on another bigger body. He constantly bit his fingernails down to the stubs. He wore cheap sneakers and always looked nervous, uptight, like he was about to break. Hargrave's arrival at Southampton gave my first sense of the strange pecking order that exists in prisons. Under that order, guys serving time for murder and assault command the most respect because their crimes make them seem super bad. Those locked up for robbery and dealing drugs can boast of being hustlers, and they were also admired. But people locked up for crimes such as rape or crimes against the elderly or children, are considered weirdos and are sometimes threatened and attacked. Because of the nature of Hargrave's cries, Southampton's administrators were concerned about his safety. Hargrave came from an upper middle class family that lived in an exclusive Richmond suburb. It was evident that he spent little, if any, time around blacks. When he was signed to work in the library, he took his time warming to hop and meet. I got to know him better after he joined the Christian Fellowship group. Several of us in the group suspected that Hargrave might have joined for protection from the wolves than out of some deep religious conviction. But we welcomed in anyway. Often, when inmates saw me talking to him, they pulled me to the side and asked, "What's he like, man? Do you think he killed all those people?" Initially, I always told them I thought he was too meek to do something like that. But over time, some things he did change my mind. Once, after someone broke into his room and stole some of his food, Hargrave laced some of his other food with poison to lay a trap for the thief. I saw then that he was a sickie with a murderous heart. It was that kind of incident that reminded me that I was in a sick place. A place was to be my home for the next few years. Somehow, I was supposed to live in the midst of all that sickness and come out rehabilitated, healthy. Talk about solutions. I don't get any more messed up than that. Mhm. All right, family. We'll wrap up. We'll start on chapter 20 next week. I hope you had a fantastic weekend. Like it might rain a little bit around here, but I don't care. I told you, I got my set up, watch some movies outside, something. I don't know. Do something. But family, I hope you have a fantastic weekend. I hope to see you Tuesday. I guess we'll still be talking about emotional intelligence and a little bit of everything. Um, I'm ready for some strangers to start joining so we can get some energy reading in. If you can't come Tuesday, I hope to see you next Thursday where we continue reading. Makes me want to holler. I appreciate you sharing some of your time and your energy with me. I appreciate you helping us build this soul family thing. And I wish you many blessings and peace, family. Peace. I knew it was gonna act up. Listen, I got this app. They be playing sometimes, but now it's gonna work. So, peace, family.